going to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Singleton.
Here.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Councilmember Campion.
Here.
Councilmember Cruz.
Present.
Mayor Powers.
Here. Then we'll have Campbell rise for a moment of silent prayer, and I hope that in this prayer we will all think of all the fires that are going on in California and pray that they all get taken out pretty soon, and just pray for the people that are affected by it. And I think Councilmember Payne will have you read the flag through that. Please. Please join me in the salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm sorry. Gentlemen, let you in.
Donna, would you please do the video statement?
The meeting of the Galt City Council is being videotaped in its entirety and will be cablecast without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the Government Affairs channel on the Comcast and Sure West cable systems. Tonight's meeting can be seen on Channel 14 and will also be webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv this Friday and Saturday at 9 a.m. Tonight's meeting can also be seen via live video streaming on the city's website at www.ci.galt.ca.us. A DVD copy is also available for checkout from any library branch. Members of the audience wishing to address council should fill out a speaker identification form and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing council and state your name for the record.
Thank you. Steve, I forgot to ask you again. I'm so sorry. Is there anything to report back from the closed session?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and council members. I just wanted to put on the record that the council was in closed session this evening, conference with legal counsel and anticipated litigation, conference with real property negotiator on 2 items, and conference with labor negotiator, and there's no action to report on any of those items.
Thank you very much. Council, are there any agenda approval, additions, and or deletions? Oh, kind of quiet peanut gallery today. All righty. We're going to move on to the presentations then. The first presentation is adult literacy, and that's the Sacramento Public Library Authority. Come on up and show yourself. Yeah. Right over here, please.
Mayor, can I just say something?
Sure.
Thank you. I just want, as being on the library board with these ladies, I am just so thrilled to have them in our town. And Rivka and all of you, thank you so much for coming to Galt from the big city.
You have the best squeeze in. So we had dinner. So it's a good thing we're down here because we had onions on our burgers. So I'm Rivka Fass, and I have the distinct honor of being the director of the Sacramento Public Library Authority. And I'm here with 1 or 2 friends. So if you don't mind, I'll introduce the folks who wanted to come to Galt tonight. As you can see, just so you know, we have the biggest crowd in Galt. Linda Beamer is our clerk of the Sacramento Public Library Authority Board. When you get official communications, they usually come from Linda. It's always nice to put a face to the name. Adrian is the president of the Friends of the Galt Library. Carolyn Roque is our branch services manager, and she's kind of a go-to person if you need help, you know, when Diane misbehaves. City librarian Diane Christensen. I know you know and love her, and that's wonderful for us. That is Shelley and Eva, also with the Friends of the Galt Library, and Jeff Rubin is the the president of the Friends of Sacramento Public Library. We have one kind of umbrella organization, and then all of the branches have friends groups, some more active than others. Galt is one of our very active and dedicated friends group. So we're here tonight because September is Adult Literacy Month, and I'm wondering if anybody here knows someone who has trouble reading. Present company excluded, of course. It's a real issue in Sacramento County. There are about 200,000 people in our community who do not read well enough to read a prescription, help their children with their homework, or perform any of the functions that all of us take for granted, and who are unable to receive services at the very most basic level. And that's what the library does. We're the agency that trains volunteers to work with adults who need to learn to read. And those volunteers give very generously of their time to help adults one-on-one learn to read. And this all came about because 30 years ago, the California State Library established something called the California Library Literacy Services. And we're here in part because September is Adult Literacy Month, but it's also the 30th anniversary of Adult Library Literacy Services for the state of California. And Sacramento Public Library is very proud of the role that we play to help the people in our community. Currently, we have about 193 volunteers. Last year, they gave 23,000 hours of time. Now, who's your budget person here, Jason? How many FTEs is that, Jason? 23,000. A lot. Like 10 FTEs. Think about that. 10 people who gave enough time throughout Sacramento County to help an adult learn to read. And that's so exciting for us because we get to celebrate when somebody actually learns to read, but in the meantime, we know that we're helping people. It's very easy for the folks out here to become a tutor. You need to spend 8 hours in a sort of a classroom setting with our literacy services person. She'll teach you everything you need to know to teach an adult to read. So we hope that you'll email the library and volunteer to become a tutor because there are currently about 100 people waiting for services. But remember, there are 200,000 people in this community countywide who need that service, so we'd love to get your help. Are there any questions?
May I?
Yes, you may.
Yeah. How do you have an outreach program to reach these folks? Because usually they're a little nervous about admitting that they have issues with reading. So do you go out in the public and recruit and look for these folks, or how is that done?
That's a great question, Councilmember Singleton. One of the challenges that you face when you don't know how to read, you're really good at faking it. And we meet people all the time, including there's a man named Steve Tafoya who's actually in a video that the State Library produced that's being broadcast throughout the state. And Steve is a high school graduate, by the way, from a high school in Sacramento County, but I won't say where. Steve joined the Army. He fought in the first Gulf War. He left the Army with an honorable discharge at the rank of sergeant. And when he came to us, was totally by accident. He walked into one of our libraries, started chatting with the librarian who happens to be dyslexic. And I don't know if that broke the ice, but he admitted that he couldn't read. And she had him pick up a book called Frog and Toad Are Friends. It's one of my favorite books for new readers. And he wasn't able to complete reading that book fluently. He wasn't able to actually just read at the first grade level. She got him hooked up with our program and a tutor, and that's 2 years ago, and he's now attending Sacramento City College and doing really well. But going back to how people find out about us, frankly, most of the time it's word of mouth. We promote like crazy, but it's usually someone, a friend or a family member who knows someone is struggling, and they'll encourage them to contact the library.
And you have a waiting list because you're lacking in volunteers, is that correct?
Yeah, there are always more people waiting than we have volunteers to serve them, and we have very dedicated volunteers, but they can only do so much. Almost all of our volunteers have full-time jobs, and so they're doing this over and above everything else they do in their lives. And when you sit down and you talk to an adult learner, the stories you hear are incredible. I met a woman who retired from the U.S. Postal Service after 42 years and decided that her gift to herself was going to be to learn to read. And, you know, we get story after story like that. And so we're very happy that we're able to provide, in a small way, this service that actually is good for all of us. It's good for our economy. When somebody knows how to read, they can get a better job. They can finish their high school equivalency, either get a GED or their high school diploma. They can go on to college. They can do all those things that they weren't able to do when they don't know how to read. So we're proud of that because it does make a huge difference. And so we thank you for letting us come and talk about.
Well, oh, sure.
I've been
Got to come up to the microphone,
a
hon.
literacy volunteer, and why I became one. My 7 older brothers did not finish school and did not learn to read hardly at all. And like she said, they got through somehow, and were able to make a life and make a successful life. But because of that, I have volunteered for years, and it is so rewarding. Like she says, I mean, the people have the stories. A lady from India that came to and would be a nurse in India, but couldn't be one here because she couldn't pass the test. You know, a man that had finished high school and was so hardworking and so did his job so well that they wanted to promote him to a managerial job. Couldn't do it because couldn't pass it, and so we went through it with him. And a boy from high school that had graduated, again I won't say either, and I couldn't understand why. I said, how did they pass you? And he said, because I was good in math. So they passed him because he was good in math and because he was a big guy. And he was the hardest one to teach. Of all the ones that I've taught, he was the hardest one to teach. I tried different methods because what I was using wasn't working. And I thought at this session, I thought, if he can't learn, I don't know how I'm going to be able to help this boy. And he was, because he couldn't do the applications. He couldn't fill out the applications. And he said, you know, at first my family was going with me and helping me fill out the applications, but they can't take off work all the time. So he knew he had to learn to read. So he came in one day after, you know, we'd been at it for at least a month and a half, and all of a sudden he started reading. He finally had gotten.
Well,
It's just really rewarding.
thank you for your service and giving back to the community. I certainly appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of others do too. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all so much.
I have a question. When you, there must be some kind of commitment that you have to make if you volunteer, like so many hours a week, or how many, you know, how long is it, what is it?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm so glad you asked that question. The commitment is you go through an 8-hour training session, and then you commit to spending an hour a week with an adult learner. And it's not like we say you have to sign up for at least 6 months. You know, we understand that things happen in your life, but that's really the commitment. And then if you do choose to continue, and often we have tutors who are on their 3rd and 4th and 5th learners. If there are workshops and things, we ask you that you attend those as well. They come up every so often, once or twice a year. But that's the commitment, that you spend an hour a week working with somebody.
And 8 hours of training.
And 8 hours of training, and the next training is Saturday, October 25th. So if you know anybody who might be interested in becoming a tutor, have them contact me or Diane, and we'll get them in touch with our literacy department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Rivka.
Thank you. Okay, now we're to stormwater permits and environmental protection. Public Works Department, who would that be? Mr. Winkler, is that you?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. This next item is to give you an informational presentation on kind of a quick overview of the regulatory environment that new development within the city as well as the city's storm drain systems reside within and the requirements we must meet. And to give you kind of a quick view of that regulatory environment, I'm going to ask Mr. Bill Forrest, our senior engineer that is very instrumental in our stormwater program, to kind of walk you through a number of slides that kind of give you an idea of what we have to do with new development as well as with our own storm drain system. And at the end, I'll talk to you briefly about some of the challenges ahead. Bill?
Thank you, Steve. Mayor Powers and City Council members, Bill Forrest with your Public Works Department. Kind of jumping to why are we talking to you about this. The city storm drainage system and public and private projects and facilities have been subject to federal and state law since about 1990. And there are three particular stormwater permits that are subject to. First of all, the city is a co-permittee for the city's storm drain system. Industrial facilities within the state need to get coverage under the state's industrial general permit. And lastly, any construction activity that disturbs more than 1 acre of land is subject to the state's construction general permit. I've been involved in stormwater for almost my entire career, and there's probably been no area of engineering that I've seen more acronyms used for the terms. This is a brief slide. I'm not going to read them all to you, but you've probably heard terms such as MEP or maximum extent practical or BMP or TMVL or SWIP or SWIPI or MPDS and whatnot. So this is just a brief slide to give you the words behind those letters that we engineers tend to bandy about. As mentioned, City of Galt is a co-permittee for the storm system permit, along with the County of Sacramento, the City of Sacramento, the City of Elk Grove, City of Citrus Heights, City of Rancho Cordova, City of Folsom, and City of Galt. The area in red is the areas that are subject to stormwater permit and the activities of what is referred to as the Sacramento Stormwater Quality Partnership. The partnership does a number of joint activities, program management studies, and whatnot, and the co-permittees fund those joint activities based upon the population. And so it got a little cut off on the screen, but that table in the lower right corner represents the population and the represented share that each of the cities and the county contribute toward the joint activities. Fundamentally, the Galt Municipal Code section 16.10.070 states a non-stormwater discharge to the city storm drain system is prohibited. Another way of saying that is only rain down the drain. Associated with that, the pollutants that the permit looks at, which has changed over time, but are currently erosion and sediment, pesticides, pathogens, metals such as copper, zinc, and lead, and litter and trash. So there are a number of tools in the toolbox to help keep those pollutants out of the city storm drain system. Number one is to keep the pollutants out of the city's system. That is typically referred to as source control. The other method is to reduce your impervious surfaces, your hard surfaces, and therefore reducing your runoff that can carry and transport those pollutants into the storm drain system. And then lastly, you have what are called, you treat the runoff before it gets into the city storm drain system. So this slide represents a number of pollutant source controls. The middle and the two to the left are activities done by the city. We sweep the streets, and that collects sediment, trash, litter, some of the other things. And so those are collected by the street sweeper and therefore not allowed to run off into the city storm drain system. We label all the storm drain inlets within the city, the no dumping drains to river, and that's to let people know that what goes into a drain inlet winds up into our creeks and rivers. We put up no dumping signs along all our drainages. This is along Dead Man's Gulch at near Emerald Park. And then lastly, another source control we look at with development is design methods to help keep the pollutants associated with particular activities from going down the storm drain system. And so what that picture to the right is showing is a fueling station. And what you see is a cover over the fueling station, and that keeps runoff from hitting the fueling pad, and therefore anything associated with that's on that fueling pad will not run off into the storm drain system. Lastly, we can treat the runoff. These are representative of probably two main things that you see. The big concrete structure that you see on your left, that is basically an underground detention basin that has parts in it to help drop out the pollutants. That's actually associated with the Rite Aid Center. That is under the parking lot just south of the Rite Aid Center. And then the picture to the right is what's called a vegetated swale. And what happens is the drainage associated with the parking lot goes into the grassy swale, and the grass and the vegetation acts as a filter for the runoff. For construction activities, as mentioned, if you disturb more than 1 acre, you need to get coverage from the state, and and we need to file a stormwater pollution prevention plan. And in all cases, you need a city-approved erosion sediment control plans for, say, disturbance less than that 1 acre. And the idea is the best management practices keeps what you see on the left side, which is sediment-laden runoff from the disturbed activities going into your storm drain system. And so you use various things such as what's shown in the picture to your left, the straw wattles, which is right at back of curb. You're covering your disturbed areas, and therefore you have a much cleaner site and no sediment and erosion into your storm drain system. Certain facilities in the state need to get coverage from the state. This is a list of particular facilities within the city of Galt or near the city of Galt. And you can see in the middle that the city is subject to this. Our corporation yard, our corp yard at 495 Industrial, we have to file an annual report and continue to get coverage under the industrial permit. Lastly, this gives you a flavor. This is last fiscal year, 2013-2014. The storm drainage program on a whole expended about $400,000. The revenues of $343,000, which is the monthly stormwater fee that shows up on the bi-monthly bill that each resident pays. And as you can see, there's a shortfall between the stormwater revenues and the stormwater expenditures, and so that shortfall is made up by a contribution from the gas taxes. And I'll turn it back to Steve for the future challenges, and then we'll be available for any questions.
Well, that's the short view of sort of the regulatory environment we live in. Developers can tell you it's quite a gauntlet to get through the design manual and get city approval, because we have the state looking over our shoulder, holding us accountable for both state and federal requirements. And if we do not hold the developers accountable to that on new construction, then our system takes the hit for responsibility for any illegal discharges. So it's a balancing act. We're always looking to encourage development and not strangle development, but we also don't want to be in violation with our outfalls going into the creeks that lead to the delta. We are tributary to the delta and therefore fall under the state implementation plan. That was the first wave of regulation where the state took the federal mandate for NPDES programs, one of those acronyms, and then developed state rulemaking. And they took a special and hard look at not only coastal areas, but some of the wild scenic river areas in the state, but any urbanized area more than 10,000 in general, and the whole Sacramento region. A joint permit was developed around a fairly urbanized area, and Galt is part of that. We have to meet standards that are consistent with the state implementation plan for the Delta, which basically mean that any form of pollutant getting into our creeks from the city's municipal storm drain system could subject us to scrutiny and potential requirements for improvement. And what I want to share with you, we have some new rules that are being rolled out by the various water boards or regional water boards throughout the state. We were recently, some of us were several weeks ago at the League of Cities conference down south, and I attended a sort of what's happening in the stormwater world breakout session. And it was probably one of the most concerning sessions that I've been to in many years relative to new regulations that are going to sort of become unfunded mandates that are imposed on local municipalities. They've adopted for both San Diego and LA are sort of the ground-setting precedents for new trash TMDLs, or total maximum daily limits, where they're now looking at screening everything, smaller than 1/4 of an inch is being prohibited down the storm drain, and how you go about filtering that and doing the maintenance on any such filters, for anything. What about leaves? What about, other debris that gets down the drain, and how you deal with that? They were coming up with, we won't likely be affected by this in the short run, but where some of these large municipal areas go, soon will go Northern California, I'm sure. They're looking at limits on bacteria loading, which can be caused by natural flora and fauna and things like wild geese and ducks and cattle and other things that are also tributary. But they look at the municipal storm drains. That can be family pets on the front yard, and any rain and any runoff from what our pets like to leave behind, starts to have issues with bacterial loading. And these are very concerning for us. We are up currently. Our current permit is technically expired, but has been extended by the regional board until they can look at a new region-wide permit for our 7-agency consortium. And we're not terribly excited about what could lay in wait for us as they're developing what that's going to look like in a proposed rule or a proposed permit. And we're a little concerned about what we see going on. Both San Diego and LA are litigating multi-million-dollar lawsuits to fight some of the requirements that they're facing. They've done some preliminary studies as to what are the per capita costs for some of these programs, and we've had lengthy discussions and study sessions on water regulations and sanitary sewer regulations that are driving costs to our residents. Some of these rules that they're imposing in Southern California that could find their way north could make our water and sewer rates pale in comparison. They're looking at some of the current requirements that they're not given either legislative or judicial relief from some of the requirements may cost between $200 and $500 per person per year to implement some of the measures that will be necessary to deal with these things. So very concerning, not doom and gloomer, but felt that as part of this presentation you ought to know that the regulatory environment is very fluid. It doesn't look like good news is down the road, and we'll be waiting somewhat of anxiety and anxiously to see what is proposed for Sacramento Regional Stormwater Permit, and then we'll be partners in crime with trying to solve those situations, and each of the cities and the county will need to be bringing to their respective councils and boards recommendations for how to finance that. So I'm not a pessimist generally, but what I'm hearing doesn't sound good for the future, and we'll keep you posted as those things evolve.
Thank you. Questions, Council? Councilmember Cruz?
Quick question, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something, did something bring this about, or is this just Cal EPA overreaching again?
Right.
California seems to be somewhat unique in that the federal agencies will pass minimum requirements, and then California likes to sort of put those on steroids and set a new record for whatever it might be in terms of requirements. And it looks to me like regulatory agencies that are, in my opinion, overreaching what the federal requirements are. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be protecting the Delta, it shouldn't be protecting our streams and creeks, but there's got to be some balance in practical reality and affordability. And if you ask me, well, what could we advocate for on the legislative front, I would say that these legislation, these regulations need to come with some form of cost accountability or cost benefit ratio to show that you're going to at least achieve the benefits that are equal to the costs that they're imposed by the rules. And there is just no connection or nexus right now between what the benefits are and what the costs are, and I feel that is creating an unrealistic regulatory environment in terms of affordability.
Thank you.
For example, the city of Folsom does not have a stormwater fee, so their stormwater program is funded out of the general fund. And they're looking at fees increase regulations, and that's a cop, that's a firefighter, that's in the case of the city of Folsom. So there is quite a bit of concern.
Yeah. I failed to point out the picture in the background of this slide is a shot of one of the crossings of Dead Man's Gulch, one of the city culverts or arch culverts. And does that look like a flood control channel to you? The conflicting purposes bullet that I didn't speak to is we've got the regulations from Fish and Game on stream bed alteration and protection of habitat and protection of environment for the benefit of species is at direct odds with the requirement to also not only provide storm drainage but flood control for the city. And so we cannot use any mechanized equipment to go in and work on that. All work has to be by hand, and many of the areas do not even have access easements other than in the waterway itself. And so it's very difficult and will ultimately become very expensive as we look to make sure the city is still flood safe while still being compatible with an environmental agenda.
Councilmember Campion, did you have something you wanted to?
I was just going to say, I mean, the big picture, the regulatory environment in California in general.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you don't have to think too hard or see why companies like Tesla, billion-dollar companies, move to Nevada or move to Texas. I mean, it's just sickening.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. I mean, and there has to be a balance. And I agree with what you're saying. You've got to create a balance between what's good for the environment and what's practical. I think a cost analysis would be appropriate. So what is the true benefit here? Or is this some scientist sitting in his cubicle determining what he thinks the ultimate should be, irrespective of cost?
I guess thus the lawsuits in San Diego and Los Angeles.
I'm sorry.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, I think it is.
So,
Huh.
yeah.
Test? No. It's not working, I guess. Green light's on. Test. They didn't want to hear from me. There.
That's too loud.
Test, test, test.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm not going to repeat it.
Steve, I'm kind of confused here for a second. So you're telling me we have to go out there and do that by hand, as far as clearing that out?
Without getting Corps of Engineers approval for disturbance of wetlands and/or fish and game, state fish and game, stream bed alteration permits, we cannot use any mechanized equipment within the water limits of the waterway.
So you took my second question away from me, because I thought the Corps of Engineers was responsible for that.
The city, I believe, got a permit to improve this channel as part of development over the last 15 to 20 years, and as under that permit is responsible for ongoing maintenance, but have very limited resources available short of handwork. CCC and waiters, I suppose, would be about our best approach without getting permits. Just anecdotally, one of my major responsibilities with my former occupation with San Joaquin County Flood Control, among other things, was to county-wide deal with several hundred miles of flood control structures, and this was a constant battle. It took 3 years to get a state permit to do vegetation, reasonable vegetation removal for a permit that was only good for 5 years. So,
wow.
very difficult.
Okay. Anyone else?
Let me just make a comment. From someone who was in construction, residential construction for 20 years, I lived in constant fear of the SWEPS people coming out. And one of the things that seemed a little unreasonable to me in the course of construction was we had to keep a daily log of the weather and any incident that happened. And they would send, usually, well, for me it was 2 ladies would come out periodically and check my log to see if I had kept it up. And if I had not, the fines were tremendous for something like that. But yeah, it was a big deal in construction. I think anyone that's been in that field knows what a threat it is to have them on your back.
It sounds like it's not getting any better.
Sounds like
It's getting worse.
I'm glad I'm retired.
Yeah, really. Okay, that it, Council? Thank you, Mr. Winkler. We appreciate it. Donna, now would you please read the public comment section?
Under Government Code Section 54954.3, members of the public may address the council on non-agenda items. Speakers may address council on any agenda item during consideration of the item. Speakers shall restrict their comments to issues that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council and limit comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Please fill out a speaker sheet located on the table inside the entrances to the council chambers and forward the completed sheet to the clerk.
And we have no speaker sheets, correct?
Right.
Okay, and then once again, would you mind reading the information and consent calendar?
Minutes of the closed and regular meeting of September 2nd, 2014. City of Galt warrants. Approval of a lease with Galt Joint Union High School District for livestock housing on the wastewater treatment plant property. Authorization of a settlement agreement and supplemental appropriation related to sidewalk repairs fronting 227 through 241 South Lincoln Way.
Move consent.
Second.
Call for the vote, please, Donna.
Vice Mayor Singleton.
Aye.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Councilmember Campion.
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz.
Aye.
Mayor Powers.
Aye. Approved 5-0. Okay, now we're on to the city attorney. This ordinance regarding use of parks, use of skate parks, and camping. That would be you, Mr. Rudolph.
Good evening again, Mayor and council members. As you indicated, there are 3 ordinances that are presented for City Council consideration tonight. And before I discuss these ordinances, I want to give you a sense as to what the current state of our regulation is, because we do have a few ordinances on the books that these proposed ordinances would replace. So first, we have one section which is tucked away in Chapter 9.12 called curfews, and that deals with city park curfews. And within that particular section, there are some regulations that deal with the hours of operation of our city parks. And in addition to that one section, there's been a few resolutions that the City Council has adopted over the last few years. There was one in 2009, and then most recently in 2011 that established the hours for our city parks. And then when you go to Chapter 12 of the Municipal Code, there's actually a section that is called Parks, but this particular ordinance deals only with overnight parking and sleeping being prohibited in parks. And then the last ordinance that is on our books is Chapter 9.37, which is entitled Skateboard and Skating Areas. And this was adopted in 2003. And basically what it provides is that when folks use our skate parks, they're required to use safety equipment in order to avoid injuries. And that was enacted in order to provide some protection to the city under the law from accidents that may have happened within the skate parks. So what you can see is that we've kind of got a smattering of ordinances, regulations on the books right now, but we really don't have a very comprehensive set of regulations to regulate our city parks. And this has become more apparent to us within the last few months because we have had situations where there has been inappropriate conduct in different city parks, that when we had our police department respond or different folks from our parks department, they were not able to point to particular regulations in order to control that particular inappropriate conduct. So what we've done is we've put together 3 ordinances that work together for your consideration tonight. The first ordinance that I want to go through is the Use of Parks Ordinance. And what this ordinance does is, first of all, it sets forth about 22 different restrictions that would be prohibited conduct within the parks. And these is just a listing of some of the more reoccurring types of activities that we have seen. It really would be impossible to come up with an ordinance that listed each and every type of conduct that is inappropriate. So the other part of this ordinance is we have proposed that the director be given certain authority to establish additional regulations for parks guided by certain requirements. What the ordinance says is that any regulations that are enacted by the Parks and Rec director need to be based upon the character of the park, the safety of the persons using the parks, the safety and maintenance of the park property, the need for and the availability of supervisory personnel, and other factors that reasonably affect the safety and enjoyment of persons using city parks. And when I get done discussing this particular ordinance, I'm going to ask Armando to give you a few other examples of the types of regulations that we actually have in place right now in a couple of our parks. The other important part of this particular ordinance is it does establish park hours. And what I have proposed in the ordinance that was in your staff report is that the hours for our parks would be from 6 a.m. until 1 hour after sunset. And the reason for the change, right now the standard is our parks close at dusk. But that's kind of an abstract term. I think if you ask anybody here when is dusk, you'd get, if you ask 5 people, I think you get 5 different answers. And so this is to give us a little bit more specificity. But when I was taking a look at Resolution 2011-90 today, which did establish park hours, I noticed that what we had done previously is that we had some exceptions relating to some city facilities, such as at Galt Community Park. We've allowed the volleyball courts, tennis courts, horseshoe pits, and basketball courts to stay open a little later, to 10 o'clock. And I talked to Armando about that today, and he suggested that that was still appropriate, but possibly at 9 o'clock. So what I have is some revisions to the ordinance that's in your packet that I'm going to hand out momentarily for your consideration. The last part about this particular ordinance is that there is a provision that provides for the ejection or exclusion of people from parks. So basically, if we have somebody that responds, a police officer responds and tells somebody that you're violating a particular provision of the ordinance and they don't comply, that we have the ability under this ordinance to say, you need to leave for the day. This ejection under this particular ordinance is only good until the next day. So it's, go home for the night, cool off a little bit, and then you can use the park starting the next day. So while I hand out the amendment, maybe I'll just turn it over to Armando to talk a little bit more about the types of regulations that we have in some of our facilities.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Some of the regulations that aren't on the books currently, such as Waffle Park, you have only players, coaches, officials are allowed on the turf area. On the turf area, there are no food of any kind, no drinks except for water, no gum, candy, sunflower seeds. Again, this is specific to Walker Park to try and protect our investment of the turf. That wouldn't apply to Veterans Field, sports complex, and those parks. Something that's specific to the skate park is there are no glass containers allowed within the park area because the kids are falling. You don't want broken glass there. We have in our sign says no profanity. We're close to our aquatic center, which you have young kids there, so you want to kind of curtail some of that action there. So it also states that we're closed during swim meets on those regulations at the skate park. So it's specific to that park, and those are some of the items that the city attorney was talking about. One point on this, these revisions that I've handed out, it does provide for closure of the Galt Community Park facilities at 9 p.m. Probably could be a situation when we get to the middle of summer where if you had sunset plus 1 hour, it might actually be beyond 9 o'clock. So maybe the 10 o'clock time that's in our current resolution might be more appropriate than 9 o'clock. But that's just something I throw out for your consideration. You might want to, so either 9 or 10 o'clock when we get to discussion. The next ordinance that I want to talk about is the skate park ordinance. And here again, first of all, we have the additional requirement or continued requirement to wear safety equipment when utilizing the skate park. We've come up with an expanded list of regulations based upon the history of some of the types of problems that we've experienced recently at the skate park to give us a little bit more ability to control that facility and ensure the safety of the folks that are using that park. Additionally, as in the first ordinance, the director has the ability to establish additional rules if he deems it's necessary in order to protect the safety of the people using the facility as well as the facility itself. And he does have the ability to close the facility if things are getting out of hand, which we did have that situation a little bit earlier this year. The last point that I want to mention on the skate park ordinance is there is a provision that if there is a minor that uses that facility and they are violating the rules, that any citation would be issued to the parents or legal guardian of that minor as opposed to the child. And then additionally, there's a provision that an individual can be suspended from using that facility for up to 1 year. Now, if we did propose to suspend somebody for 1 year, they do have the right to appeal that punishment, that penalty, in addition to any other administrative penalty that we would seek to impose. So that's the summary of the skate park ordinance. Before I go into the camping ordinance, are there any questions on the skate park ordinance?
I would like to ask what is the process for appeal?
So the process for appeal is to come in and file a request for appeal with the city clerk, and then that particular appeal would go to the city manager first for consideration, and if that did not resolve the issue, then there is an opportunity for an administrative appeal by an impartial hearing officer, and the hearing officer can be appointed by the city clerk.
So they wouldn't come before the council?
No, it would not.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's in keeping with the provision that we have in place now for all administrative appeals. So anytime we have a code enforcement issue and there's a code enforcement violation, that is the appeal mechanism that's in chapter 21 of the municipal code right now. So it's just utilizing that same process.
I just had a question. Is it,
I understand you want to cover everything in here, but the possession or use of marijuana, that's pretty much disallowed by state law, and we need to reiterate that in the local ordinance?
Well, we don't need to certainly to make it a violation. I think the reason we've added it in is because, frankly, it has been
An
issue that we've experienced, and what we would do after the adoption of this ordinance is, in addition to the items that are currently regulations, we would add this to the sign so that folks that show up would be able to just see in black and white for themselves that you can't be smoking marijuana while you're using the skate park. So,
And if I
Armando, is there anything else you wanted to add on that one? I mean, that is something that we have experienced from time to time at that facility, right?
Yes, some of the council members have also experienced that firsthand, also having meetings out there at the Parks and Rec buildings also.
my last question, were these reviewed by the Recreation Commission?
Yes, all three ordinances did go to the Parks and Rec Commission for review, and they did recommend the adoption of all three ordinances. I don't know, was there any other comments that they made that you wanted to share?
I was not in attendance at that meeting, but the only concern they had was the setting of the fees of the fines. And it is covered here. It's not set by the Parks and Rec director. It is set by the city.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that Mr. Campion had brought up about the marijuana issue, that there's people in the pool area and others that may not smoke the marijuana, don't really care for that particular smell, just the same thing as tobacco. But one thing I did want to bring up real quick is under restrictions on 1212.030 on line 2, it says take any dog into any, these are no person shall engage in any of the following activities at the park. Take any dog into any designated playground areas nor in any other park unless upon a leash, except in designated off-leash dog park areas. This part here where it says unless upon a leash, and I've seen it in some California case law, that's kind of general, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't add a controlled leash, because there are a lot of folks who have these retractable leashes, and that is not a controlled leash, and I've seen where dogs, and people have been bitten by dogs that have been, these dogs charge out after somebody or another animal, and they get bit. And I'm a little concerned that one, somebody gets bit, but two, that it might hold us up for some litigation in the future. So maybe we just take another look at that, maybe put under controlled leash.
Okay, certainly, we can certainly add that word if it's council's aware. So it's called a controlled leash?
I'm using my own terms. I'm sure it's another cut. It has to be 6 foot.
Right.
I think at a minimum, Chief, and it can't be a retractable, because I've seen, like I said, case law where people have had it on retractable and their dog bit somebody, and you're still liable because you were not able to control your dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could put in there a 6 foot, maximum 6 foot leash or something.
Yeah.
Would that be appropriate?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Yeah, sounds kind of acceptable.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cruz?
On several of these, I've noted that it says you cannot do it except in designated areas, but what areas are going to be designated for these actions? Example would be, let's see, gasoline off-powered model airplanes, fireworks, things of that nature.
Yeah, so I think at this point in time, there, in some of these situations, there may not be designated areas. So if we haven't established a designated area, then it's an activity that you can't be involved in. But it was written in a manner so that in the future, if we do have property that is appropriate for that type of activity, we can in fact provide for that type of activity without coming back and modifying the ordinance.
Well, the reason why I ask is 4th of July is a grand example. You've got people who go out to the community park, they go out to our softball fields, they set off their own fireworks, or safe and sane fireworks, while they're watching the others. So what you're basically telling them is you're not going to do this.
Well, I mean, that's what the regulation provides, but I think with any ordinance that we adopt, that when we have our enforcement people go out there, that they need to exercise a little bit of common sense, and sometimes you have situations where if it's a one-time event and you have a lot of folks that are involved in a particular activity and the property's not getting hurt and people aren't getting hurt, that might be a day that we don't enforce the ordinance to 100%.
Sounds good.
Council?
I just have one other comment under the skateboard, or skate parks, under section 9.37.050, sub I. It says, no person shall skate on curbs, fences, railings, walls, benches, tables, and/or driveways of city-owned area surrounding the skate park. I understand it's oriented towards skate parks, but do we have another ordinance that covers other city-owned property, walls? I mean, it would just be in that particular area. Benches and tables, what about the other parks? I guess it would be on any city-owned property that has these facilities in addition to the skate park. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, this ordinance was drafted to really just talk about regulating the activity at the skate park itself.
Okay.
And not citywide to regulate skating. So that's why it was drafted that way. I think that if we wanted to look at
Under park regulations?
If we wanted to look at restriction on skating on city facilities on a broader scale, I'd probably go back to the first ordinance.
Well, I'm just thinking the reason you don't want them to do it is, one, damage the facilities.
Right.
So it probably wouldn't be a bad idea, I wouldn't think, unless someone can think of a reason why we wouldn't want to. But it would make sense that it would cover all parks. Yeah, or designated areas, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could, one approach to that could be to take that I from 9.37 and just add it to the list, make it number 23 in ordinance, in the first ordinance under chapter 12.12.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just city-owned property or
Yeah.
facilities, yeah, okay.
And just take out surrounding the skate park.
Okay.
Just as a informational, I had read this earlier today myself. You do have a broad coverage under 12.12.040, which is defacing or damaging park property in general, which could cover using skateboards or other things. But there's certainly room to add specific provisions. If you so please, I would, sure that would be your privilege.
Well, it gives the employees something specifically to point at.
Right, yeah, and that's pretty helpful for our folks. So no, I think it's a good idea to add that in.
Okay.
So unless there's any other questions on that one, I'd like to just briefly talk about the camping ordinance. And this is a little bit broader because this does regulate not only public property but private property. And the intent behind this ordinance is basically to prohibit folks from camping, sleeping overnight on public property or private property that they do not own. So it's written very broadly as far as the prohibition, and then when you get to section 040, it essentially reauthorizes certain types of camping activity, the type of activity that you would normally expect to allow within a community, such as, you know, if you have folks that are visiting you in an RV or a travel trailer in front of your house or parked in your driveway, that's certainly allowed. If you want to camp in your own backyard, it's something that is certainly allowed. Or if somebody else wants to let you camp in their backyard, it's also allowed. But the broader intent is that we want to have the ability to prohibit folks from camping, setting up camp within city parks, within other publicly owned property, or even on vacant lots that are privately owned, unless there is express authorization or we designate those areas as being parts of the city where camping is permitted. So that's the last ordinance that is presented tonight that we think gives us some good enforcement ability to control the property within the city and to make it a safe and pleasant environment for our residents. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that council has.
Okay, council, just 1 second. We do have a public comment regarding the skate park. Mr. Baldwin?
Al Baldwin, good evening. Concerned citizen of Galt, community of character, and hopefully we look after our youth. When this skate park was first started, it started from a suggestion from me. I was getting a haircut, saw skateboarders going back and forth, people were complaining, said call the cops, so there's no ordinance. Is there anything listed? Nothing. Took a while, the council finally made an ordinance in Galt. Then I came back again and I says, you know, we really handicapped a lot of these kids and they can't do anything, they can't go anywhere. So after a while, and that took a lot longer, we developed a skate park. And we had an ad hoc committee and we discussed a lot of things. We had a lot of the skate park people coming in, the kids that would like to do it, in discussions. What I'm hearing tonight is some ordinances which are probably needed, okay? But what have you done to help the skate park over this? You talk about marijuana, you talk about kids lingering around. We did this when we had another person in charge of Parks and Rec, and we discussed it quite heavily. And what happened was they were going to put cameras in some of the parks. Some were real, some weren't at that time. Then after a while, the real cameras started coming in when they developed a new center for the Parks and Rec. And they had a camera in the park, now, the skate park. Now that was being monitored. I don't know if it's being monitored now or not, but if it is, you'd be able to see a lot of things that are going on. You say, well, gee, that's expensive. Well, it's in the office. Whoever was in charge at that time has a monitor there and can monitor it when they're in there, which isn't bad at all, and can react quite rapidly. The thing is we're talking about young children in Galt, and there's nothing for them to do. Now, these ordinances are going to be, we tried the police department, go by there, you know, check it, that's a lot of work too for them. We went through the safety factor with the knee guards and the helmets and all that, and we couldn't get that, enforced, so they said insurance-wise, you can just put a sign up there. So we didn't have to have someone there. What I'd like to see the council look into is, the ordinances are good, but these are restrictive to a lot of them, and I'm not saying they're not wanted or needed, but can you start looking for something that the kids can do in Galt and emphasize it as much as you're doing these ordinances? because the kids in this town don't have a Boys and Girls Club, they don't have a place to go. Some of the churches are trying to do their best to get them to go in, but we need a building or a central location for these young, well, children and young adults to do something with. And we're not concentrating on that, we're concentrating on making more laws and ordinances, and we're not even watching them, and we need more activity out there at the skate park to keep it going. And that'll keep them active and no police. Thank you very much.
I just want to say something to you, Al. It has been on our minds, and you would be surprised at how many meetings we are all working together, putting our heads together, trying to find a solution. But as you know, it costs a lot of money, and even finding a vacant building around here has been a little bit of a hassle. But we've all been working on it, and it's a subject that is really important to the five of us up here, and we talk about it a lot. And we're working on seeing
I
what we can
appreciate
get
your
done.
response to that and answering back on it. We didn't pay anybody for the ad hoc committee. I was in charge of it. And there was people in Galt, citizens, named very upstanding citizens on that committee. Didn't cost a dime. You could do that very similar with the same situation in Galt, with what you're doing here. Listen to some of the kids. Get their input. You just don't know. You're destroying. And I know it's serious with the marijuana and all that, but you're destroying. Eventually, that skate park's going to go, from what I hear, what I see, what I can visualize for the future. What are you going to do if that goes for the kids? That's all I'm asking.
I would like to say something.
Okay, go ahead, Barb.
Al, I have to say, I agree with a lot of what you said, and you said it maybe a little bit stronger than I would have said it, but for example, with the skate park, we worked on it for a long time to get it, and now it's starting to shrink, but Vice Mayor Singleton and I were at the League of Cities, and we went to a session on skate parks. And at that session, one of the suggestions, which was a positive thing, was to have programs at the skate park. And the person that spoke had statistics that said if you have programs and if you have a decent skate park, crime actually goes down.
Right.
And I agree, and especially with the skate park, I would like to see us take a more positive approach to it. With our youth council, we talked about this a little bit, and one of the students said, you know, you're not going to solve the problem by shrinking the park, which we did by moving the fence. So one of the things I would really like to see us do is let's put some effort into looking at a program, and I think Pal maybe started, but do get the kids involved in making the decisions. They really do know what's right and what's wrong. You know, I was out there at the skate park, and I have to agree with Armando. The language was not terrific, but I still like the kid, and I'd like to make him change his language. So I'm hoping, and there was a couple of other things in here that I kind of wanted to go over, but the one thing I wanted to say strongly is just talking here, we're getting different perspectives. I would like to see this put out to the public, perhaps put it in the newspaper where everybody has a chance to read it and give their input. Because, for example, live music in the park. Well, you know, we don't want bands, everybody knows that. But if I want to sit in the park and play my guitar and sing, hopefully I should be able to do that without having the chief haul me off to jail. But I mean, that's extreme, but I'm just saying I'd like to see this put out to the public, get input, get different ideas. And there's a lot of stuff contained in this. Another example on camping, it's been a tradition for senior citizens, if they're camping in their motorhome, to stay in the Walmart parking lot if they're on a trip. So is that going to be prohibited?
Look, I'm gonna let you guys talk.
Yeah, really.
The skate
Yeah.
park. Now you're getting really.
Right, yeah.
But I did appreciate your thoughts and agree with a lot of
And
it.
I don't want campers in the skate park.
Okay.
Are you sure? Okay, Barbara, were you
Well,
finished?
I think he was gonna answer my question, then I do have another question. Actually, I spent a lot of time on this one. But not that many questions, don't give me that look. It's okay. Because you say on private property, it doesn't distinguish, is it commercial, is it residential, just says private property. You can't have a motorhome or a trailer or something.
Well, I think that Walmart has a thing about that.
So it is authorized because it's on property with the consent of the owner. And so that would be covered under 952.040. Yeah.
Okay, and then the other thing, without thinking about the staff that I care so much about, I'm wondering, should the Director of Parks and Rec solely be able to establish additional rules? And then what is the process? According to this, if he does establish a rule, you have to put up a sign. So then is there like a grace period? Okay, the director establishes a new rule, you go get a sign made, and then is there like a grace period before it becomes effective? It just seems like this is so broad that it could go either way.
Well, my thought in drafting it is, first of all, it's not any regulation without any kind of standard. The regulations have to reasonably be related to protecting the safety of the public, the safety of the facility. And the reason for the posting is because if it's not in the ordinance, then obviously if it's not posted, people wouldn't know about it. But once it's posted, then they would see the particular rule. And a lot of the types of regulations, some of which Armando talked about tonight, I think are the type that, at least in my opinion, I didn't think that we'd want to come back and discuss with the City Council, but certainly if the City Council doesn't want to delegate that level of discretion to the Director and wants to just limit it to the rules that are in the ordinance, subject to coming back for an amendment, we can certainly do that. But I think that we ought to remember that, as I was talking about earlier about exercising common sense, that every time we have city officials out interpreting ordinances, applying laws, exercising their discretion, whether it's police officers or code enforcement officers or people reviewing plans over the counter, we call upon our folks to exercise their discretion with a degree of common sense, with a degree of reasonableness based upon the purpose of their review. And my recommendation to the council was at this level of delegation at the director level to establish appropriate rules for a park facility was something that was reasonable. But again, that's within the council's discretion. If that's not something you're comfortable with, you certainly can strike those provisions from the ordinances.
And so then, to follow up on that, once a rule is, a new rule is made up and we have a sign, then it goes to you and to the city manager to do what with it?
So I was just really a notification, and that's only actually in the skate park ordinance that I put it in, but it's not for, it's just so that we're aware of it. But the reality is that if, let's say you had a rule that was established by a director that was creating a problem because it was unduly restricting the use of a particular facility, normally those kind of complaints ultimately make their way to the city manager, they make their way to the city council, and then that would be a cause for us to take a look at that particular provision. But, you know, again, if that's, you know, if that level of discretion is cause for concern either now or in the future, we can always take it out.
I question whether does the rule carry the same weight and enforceability as the ordinance? I mean, because effectively it's a change to the ordinance, isn't it? Or is it an interpretation of the ordinance?
No, so basically it would have the same effect as something that was contained within the ordinance, because the ordinance is delegating to the director the ability to establish additional rules, and if there was a violation of that particular rule, we would treat it the same as something that is on one of the listed, you know, 22, 23 items within the ordinance.
Is there a reason that could be treated any differently than what we did with the flea market rules? Temporarily enforced until there's a formal adoption or consideration by the council within a 45-day period.
We could.
I don't know if that's the concern. I'm kind of hearing that you're concerned about not being aware of what the rules are. I don't question necessarily the reasonableness of it, but I think it's just so that everybody knows that there's a change in the rule.
And there are some pretty stiff possible punishments if you break the rules, which that concerns me as well.
I think the difference here is there are a lot of rules in our parks that are not in this ordinance. So if you wanted every rule in the ordinance, and that's the only way you could have something that's enforceable, you'd have to add maybe 20 items to that list. For example, if you go to our artificial turf field, there's probably a dozen rules out there that don't apply to any other park. You can't chew sunflower seeds because they get in the field and it makes it difficult. Chewing gum, types of containers, I don't know what all the rules are out there, but there's all kinds of things out there. Different rules for the aquatic center, different rules for the skate park. So we could certainly lower every single rule into the ordinance, or kind of set some general parameters and allow staff to make kind of the specific rules that deal with, you know, public safety as well as the security and maintenance of the facilities. And if there's a concern with any of them, then we can certainly get direction to change those. So I think you have to go one way or the other. I think the reason Steve put that language in there is because in the past, staff just made the rules without any rules. There's no authority to do it. We just did it, right, over years. I mean, it's been done that way for decades. And so this now makes it explicit that council is saying, you know, under these certain circumstances, staff has the ability to make things as long as those rules are intended to protect the public, to protect the facilities, those things that are reasonable to make sense. You know, we have the authority to make those rules.
So if someone questions a rule and we have a sign up, is it going to have the ordinance that supports that sign? And then is that ordinance going to be simply that the director of public works has the authority to make the rules? Is that basically what we're establishing here?
I think
just that blanket. Okay.
Yes, I mean that is correct. I mean basically we're starting with a foundational list of restrictions for the parks that are in the ordinance. But to the extent that we haven't captured everything, which we know we haven't,
right,
then the director has the ability to establish other types of regulations depending upon the type of facility, and to post those rules which have the same effect and force as if they had been in the ordinance. And you know, as the city manager was indicating, you know, there's a wide distinction between the types of regulations we might have at you know, just one of the baseball fields as opposed to you know, the expensive artificial turf field that we put down, and there might be future types of activities or types of facilities that call for their own unique type of regulation. And so we call upon the director and task him with imposing whatever types of regulations he deems appropriate in order to protect the facility and protect the people using it. And we frankly would hope that somebody at that level would have the ability to exercise that discretion without it's causing problems within the community. Every so often we all make decisions which are cause for review, and I think there's opportunities to do that when the issue is brought to our attention.
Well, and I think if we're talking about maintenance, the things that you gave examples for, that's different, but there is no restriction on this. It just says establish any rules. And maybe if we made a little more distinction about it, the parks in our city affect nearly everybody, seniors, youth. I just want to be sure that we don't restrict them so much that we take away the whole intent of providing parks for everybody. And that's why I would really like for this to be maybe published in the papers. Everyone could review it, give their thoughts, because it is an important part of every citizen's life here, whether it's our kids or our seniors.
I understand your concern, but after listening, I think that I think what staff's trying to do is have a mechanism where the exception is going to cause the problem, and if it's not a identified violation of this ordinance, common sense would tell you it's wrong. Therefore, you should have a rule, and it's not covered by this set of rules here. On the other hand, if it's such an onerous rule, I believe that the council, the city manager, someone's going to hear about it. Mm-hmm. So I don't, and that would presume that someone, did something in an arbitrary fashion, and I don't think there's no intent here, maybe accidental, but I don't know that it's irrevocable, and to that extent, I think it allows staff to react to things when necessary, to have that authority to make rules. So I tend to believe it's okay at this point.
I would still like to get input from the citizens to see if there's some area of it that there's a perspective that we're not considering, because the parks do belong to the people, and I would like to hear if they have anything to say about it.
Is there anything in particular, or are you just talking about all of them?
I'd just like to have it printed and available. I'd like to see it posted at the Parks and Recs Department. I'd like to see it in the newspaper, maybe at our fields, our sports facilities, just so people could look at it and say, hey, what about this,
Well, and the other point...
And there's a lot in here, too.
And the other point of it, too, is so people are aware of what it is, the rules are.
Yeah, instead of all of a sudden, we throw it on them and they're not aware of it.
I do have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Steve, on when you made reference, Councilmember Payne asked about parking in the Walmart.
Yeah.
You made reference to 52040F, and I read that to interpret to mean that only applies to residents, not commercial. Mm-hmm. And before I move on, if it applies to residents, I think that's fine. I would prefer to see the wording such that rather than within 100 feet of the location of where the property or residence is, that maybe it be on the street adjacent to. I can see potential problems with neighbors if someone puts their 36-foot RV covering their front yard, which would be across the street, and it would be within the 100 feet, but I think it should be adjacent to the residence or occupant of the residence.
Okay.
And then under C of the same subsection, it talks about motorhomes, travel trailers, but it only allows them during, organized sporting events or community events. And I think where Councilmember Payne was going, that maybe there should be an option where the property owner on non-residential, with the property owner's approval, could allow a stay of up to 3 consecutive nights within some designated, not to be more than once in 30 days or whatever he thinks appropriate. but I understand what she was getting at. And it is up to Walmart. I mean, if they don't want them there, they'll tell them.
Right.
Or any other commercial establishment for that matter. So that would be my recommended change. Ask council to consider.
Okay, Vice Mayor, you have something?
I just wanted to make a quick comment on Mr. Baldwin's statements when he came up here. On July 31st, the police department and the Police Activities League did hold, as you were there, a function at the skate park, and we started intervening with these kids and kind of letting them know that we're human too. And I think that even I spoke with Mr. Solis afterwards, and he I think it was a week after, he noted that the attitudes in the park had changed as far as the kids that are attending that park and all. So there is a concerted effort with the PAL organization. I'm working with some kids now through Galt High School, and you'll be hearing about that a little more, hopefully within the next month or so. So we are really trying hard to get something for these kids to do, and schedule some events and keep them on the right track. So I just want to make sure that you knew and understood we are still trying. It wasn't a one-time event for PAL. It's a continued effort with the Police Activities League. And, you know, it was great to have the police department. Even Mr. Behrman was there. So we are trying to do what we can, sir.
And I'd like to add on to that. It has opened up, that event did open up dialogue between park staff, police staff, with the kids using that. I have met with them, worked with them on a list of issues that what they see as issues at the skate park. We've had maintenance out there for Public Works to fix some of the issues that they've had. We're currently working on getting some quotes to expand some of the area within the skate park. So we are still continuing to work with them. Again, the calls for service have decreased. It's you know, it's worked well. That was a great event that opened up dialogue between staff and the users of that park. And I'm glad we did that.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Cruz, no.
One more.
Okay.
Item number 17, under restrictions, 12.12030. I just want to know, has this been a problem? Sell, vend, peddle, offer for sale, or distribute after sale to the public in merchandise, service, or property, or sell tickets for any event except by special permit? Is this something that has become a problem?
I don't know. Armando, do you know whether you've got any experience with that item?
What was the number again?
17.
So basically, it's, you know, the short version is basically people trying to sell things to people when they're in the park.
It does happen at the Galt Market at the sports complex. We have issues specifically at that site when things like that happen. We do have some events that happen at other parks without permission. But specifically to the sports complex is where we have that problem the most.
Don't we have a no soliciting ordinance?
It's also covered under the market rules and regulations as part of our area that we control too. So it's double
To
covered.
reiterate that. Okay. So, I guess we're done. Do we have, Steve?
So, Mayor, I think there's been a lot of good suggestions as far as modifying some of the language in the ordinances tonight. And so what I would suggest is that we continue the matter and that I make those corrections and bring it back. But the one item that I'd like to get direction from the council is whether or not you want to continue it long enough for staff to actually publish this ordinance or these ordinances in the newspaper. And if that is the desire of the city council, what my recommendation would be, I mean, there's one option is we just print the ordinances verbatim And where they usually end up is they go to the back of the paper
Right.
in the legal part, and I don't think many people frankly read it. So another option is for us to do a smaller ad that says that the city council is considering the adoption of new regulations relating to use of parks, skate park, camping in public and private property within the city. For a copy of the ordinances, please contact the city clerk. We can do that in larger print, and we can do it at much less cost than if we printed all 3 of these ordinances in the paper. So if you do want us to go through the publication, I'd ask that you consider that as an option.
Could we put that on our website?
Yeah, we certainly can do that as well.
And then if we wanted to copy it at the Parks and Recs building to post it there, we could do it easily.
Right.
And that's a
the
good
other-
idea.
Sorry. And the other thing is not charge for, sometimes when people come in and they need something, we charge them so much, we wouldn't be charging them for this if we put it on.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe the newspaper can say something about tonight's meeting.
They're all out there going,
And we've waited this long, so I could support that action with that amendment to that.
Okay, great. So I think there's consensus that we'll put it on the website. We'll make it available at different places within the city, and then we'll put that publication in the newspaper. Give it a couple of weeks after it actually shows up in the paper, and then bring it back at the next regular meeting after that for the council to take this item up again. Is that acceptable?
sounds like a
Sounds
good
like we'll make
idea.
that.
Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. So moving right along. I know it's when, but let me, I'm sorry, let me find what it is.
She's
Okay.
picking up here.
Rejection of bids for the firing range Phase 1 improvements and approval of consultant contract amendments for the Regional Law Enforcement Training Center. And this is Public Works and Steve.
Madam Mayor and Council, we are recommending that you reject the recently received bids for Phase 1 of the firing range project, and that you then take related actions to actually authorize some contract amendments to our design and environmental consultants to actually achieve some cost savings prior to going back out to bid. And with that, I'd like Gwen to maybe give you a real quick overview of a couple of the issues related to this.
Very briefly, this is a map of the wastewater treatment plant. Currently, this is where the proposed firing range is being designed. The existing firing range is a little bit east and north of the proposed location.
Right.
Okay. With that, Public Works. Okay.
I can do it.
Okay. With that, Public Works designed the Phase 1 firing range to a minimum project consisting of 3 100-yard ranges. Basically, staff put the firing range out to bid with the understanding that we could only award the contract if we were able to get a use agreement with the California Department of Correction and Rehabilitation, or if the bids came in extremely aggressively. During the time when the project was out to bid, staff worked with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to execute an agreement for the firing range use, and this would cover the construction costs. Due to the time it takes to process an agreement with that agency, basically the state, we were not able to execute an agreement in the allotted amount of time. Staff is still currently working with the Correctional and Rehabilitation to be able to execute this agreement. Thus, without that agreement, the city does not have adequate funds to construct the project, and staff is recommending rejecting all bids. During this process, staff also worked with a consultant to value engineer to reduce the construction costs. Basically, by taking dirt from the surrounding fields at the wastewater treatment plant, as opposed to importing dirt, it's estimated that the project construction costs could be reduced by 15% or more. This modification requires the project to be redesigned and an amendment to the environmental document. Thus, the contract amendments for URS and Rainey. With that, that's the conclusion of my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions? I think it's self-explanatory. Would you mind reading the recommended action, Donna, please?
Adopt a resolution rejecting all bids for construction of the firing range Phase 1 improvements project, CIP number 58E. And 2, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to take the following actions related to the Regional Law Enforcement Training Center. A, execute amendment number 2 to the agreement for design services with URS in the amount of $22,100, and B, execute amendment number 3 to the agreement for environmental services with Rainey Planning and Management in the amount of $4,095, and C, authorize funding contingencies of $5,000 for the URS contract and $1,000 for the Rainey contract to address future contract amendments that may be necessary to complete Phase 1 of the project.
Do I have a motion?
I did have a question before we get to that. Do we have an update on the reason we have not been able to secure an agreement with CDC?
We were led to believe that we could enter into a contract, and we had some problems. We're still in a contract at the end of the 5th year. We just received their last payment, and it expires, I believe, in June of next year. And at that time that we were trying to set up all these meetings and to come up with some kind of agreement, they were told that they couldn't alter the contract until the end of it. As late as today, I was again trying to get a hold of their director, who's not available, and they told me he'd probably be calling back tomorrow. We are still pushing forward, trying to come up with an agreement, but that was the last we had, was the fact that, in fact, they couldn't do anything about the contract until it had reached its limit as far as the 5 years.
And when is the 5 years up again?
It's 2015, and I believe it's June 30th.
So it'll just be, it'll be based on the current, well, did they give, has there been any indication, because I know this has been ongoing for a number of years, about trying to get a, multi-year contract so that we have a revenue stream in order to pay off the bonds that I suppose we're going to sell in order to do the improvements. I mean, has there been any indication that that's going to occur?
Well, from the staff here in Galt, as far as the training facility, yes. With the staff in Sacramento, I don't know if that's true. And I think that's part of the problem, is administrative offices within the state in Sacramento. But I know that everyone that we have spoke to as far as the facility really want this, because as I've mentioned before, they were talking about 3,800 cadets coming through this year, 28 the next 2 years, and then back to their regular attrition rate of 1,900. So this facility here would save the facility and also the state of California a considerable amount of money, because they wouldn't be transporting them to Ione for some of their classes. And that's the big savings, so I'm pretty sure that administration here really wants to work with us, and I think there's a holdup within the state.
Well, I think it's a very good project, but I think that given the time that's passed, that maybe it's time for, I don't know, Jason, you, maybe the chief, to find out who the decision maker is in Sacramento at the state level, and sit down and find out whether there is interest, because I'm sure they want to use it. Whether they want to commit to a long-term agreement so that we can undertake the improvements is another thing. So, I mean, I know we need to do these improvements. If this is going to be the preferred site, so that you've got to make the changes in the engineering as well as the environmental. But I wouldn't want to spend a whole lot more money on a project that doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere.
That was my exact question to them, is I need to know who the person is that we can talk to and sit down and meet and see if we can come up with some kind of agreement. I know that showing in the financial impact regarding what they're currently doing versus our facility here in Galt directly across the street will really benefit the state of California. And so I'm looking for that individual now and going over as far as the director here to find that individual.
Yeah, all the money we're spending right now is from previous lease payments we received from CDCR as well as other agencies. So we still have about $150,000, $160,000 in the bank that we can continue to use to move forward. But obviously that's well short of the $1 million to build this phase. And so right now we're getting about $70,000 a year from CDCR from the existing contract, and so in order to make the debt service payments or the loan repayments, whatever we end up doing to finance it, that lease amount's going to have to go up significantly in order to make that work. And so that's where the discussion, has taken place, but we haven't got commitment yet from the CDCR whether they're willing to spend the amount of money necessary for us, because we're not going to recommend that we proceed with the project unless we have a guaranteed revenue stream for a number of years in order to pay that debt back.
Okay, that was all.
Anyone? Oh, Mark, I'm sorry, you said you.
I was going to move the item.
Oh, okay. Can we, do you want to read the resolution? Donna, please.
Adopt a resolution rejecting all bids for construction of the firing range Phase 1 Improvements Project, CIP number 58E. And 2, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to take the following actions related to the Regional Law Enforcement Training Center. A, execute amendment number 2 to the agreement for design services with URS in the amount of $22,100. And B, execute amendment number 3 to the agreement for environmental services with Rainey Planning and Management in the amount of $4,095. And C, authorize funding contingencies of $5,000 for the URS contract and $1,000 for the Rainey contract to address future contract amendments that may be necessary to complete Phase 1 of the project.
And so moved by Councilmember Cruz. Do I have a second? Second. Call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Singleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Payne?
Aye.
Councilmember Campion?
Aye.
Councilmember Cruz?
Aye.
Mayor Powers?
Aye.
Passed unanimously.
Mayor
Thank
Powers.
you.
Mayor Powers, real quick on this item. I had a question for the chief now. Is there a way we can sit down and figure out exactly what they're paying per person when they go out to the Ion range versus what we're paying per person for our range?
They gave me a rough estimate regarding that as far as an hour overtime up and back, fuel costs, but I do not have that. I can ask them to see if we can do some kind of comparison so that when we meet, that we can play apples to apples.
Because at a discounted rate, I know it's $13 per person out of that range, and even at a discount rate of $10 a person, they got to see the difference.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to adjourn the Galt City Council and convene to the Galt Successor Agency. Roll call, please, Donna.
Board Members Singleton?
Here.
Payne?
Here.
Campion?
Here.
Cruz?
Present.
And Powers?
Present. Information, there was a public comment.
No, there is not.
Could you please read the information and consent agenda, please?
Minutes of the August 4th, 2014 meeting, and a resolution of the successor agency adopting the recognized obligation payment schedule for January through June 2015.
And
there are no successor warrants.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay, call for the vote, please.
Board Members Singleton?
Aye.
Payne? Aye. Campion?
Aye.
Cruz?
Aye.
Powers?
Aye.
Passed unanimously.
Thank you. Now we're going to adjourn the Galt Successor Agency and reconvene to the Galt City Council. And back to you, Donna, with the city clerk's report.
I just have a few calendar dates. Beautification Committee meets right here at City Hall on Thursday, and then on Monday we have the Public Safety Committee meeting at the Pachetti Community Room at the Police Department. And then on Thursday we have Commission on Aging at Parks and Rec Building. Then the Galt Youth Committee the following Monday, which brings us to the City Council meeting on the 7th.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments by staff? Over here. Inez, Steve?
Just wanted to note that our residents have been experiencing some minor traffic disruptions and detours around town, in particular over the last week and a half or so. Your gas tax dollars are hard at work in Galt, and we've had major repairs and repaving going on 5th Street and on Amador and on Pringle and on some work over here on Caroline, first phase of the microservicing project, and that'll be continuing through the end of the week. There have been some handicap ramps going in as part of ADA compliance with that work, and we've had a lot of patience by those that are affected by those road detours and closures and traffic delays, but we're seeing some, I think, with some benefits that will be good for the city once the dust settles, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll get all the striping back down and bike lanes back down, and it'll be brand new roads within the city. So we thank everyone for their patience.
Thank you. Anyone over here? Chief? Jason? Steve? So then we'll just go right around the circle to Councilmember Campion.
Nothing.
Cruz?
Nothing.
Payne?
Just report a little bit on the League of Cities that I attended a while back now. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was attending a session on the skate park, which they had some really great ideas on that. Another one, which was sort of appropriate for tonight, they talked about a program called Lunch at the Library. And they pointed out in the summer, a lot of the kids don't get the meals that they do when they're in school, when they get the free lunches. So the libraries, some of them started a program where they could come to the library and have lunch and read. That was a good one too, as well as how to build good neighborhoods and communities. So I'm ready to get busy.
Vice Mayor Singleton?
Nothing.
Okay, with that, I will adjourn the meeting.